Ever try picturing how a university professor organizes all the stuff in their brain?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you know they're experts in their field.
Right.
But then on top of that, they've got to keep up with all the latest research and wrangle lesson plans and student feedback.
It's a lot to manage.
Talk about a knowledge management challenge.
It really is. It's a real balancing act. And that's actually what's got us so intrigued by this article we're diving into today. It digs into this whole concept called, get ready for it, leerbezogenes wissensmanagement.
Whoa. Okay, I'm already lost.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
That's German.
Right. It is. It translates to teaching-related knowledge management.
Okay.
But it's way more than just, staying organized.
Okay, so then let's break it down. When we say teaching-related knowledge management, what are we actually talking about here?
Well, the article defines it as, and I'm going to quote this here, the systematic, efficient, and sustainable use of knowledge in the context of teaching.
Right.
Which, I know that sounds pretty formal.
Sure.
But it really boils down to this idea that it's not just about what you know as a teacher, but how you actually use that knowledge to guide your students.
Interesting. So it's less about just like memorizing a bunch of facts.
Right.
And more about how you actually build a system for making those facts meaningful.
Precisely. It's about creating this sort of dynamic web of information that really reflects how you as an educator connect the dots for your students.
That's really interesting. And I think, I don't know if you had this experience, but I remember back in school, the teachers who I always felt the most engaged with were the ones who could draw these unexpected connections between different topics. Like they could take something from history and connect it to something we were learning in science.
Exactly.
And it just made that information feel so much more relevant.
Absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting because the article goes on to explore how educators are using this whole concept of teaching-related knowledge management to essentially design their own personalized systems for learning and teaching.
So they're like creating their own mental maps, but with a method to the madness.
You got it. And some are even, turning to technology to help them actually build out these systems in a way that amplifies their ability to connect with students.
That's fascinating.
And share information effectively.
See, and that's something that I think we can all kind of relate to, like whether we're teaching a class or just trying to, keep our own ideas straight.
Right.
It's like having this toolbox, but it's for your brain.
Exactly. And the article really zeroes in on a particularly fascinating tool that some educators are using to build out these, get this, second brains.
Okay.
It's called Obsidian. And it's really, I think, changing the game when it comes to knowledge management.
Okay, so let's dive into this Obsidian thing a little bit. What makes it so special? So we're talking about Obsidian like it's this second brain for educators. And I have to admit, it sounds a little intimidating.
Yeah.
Is it as complicated as it sounds?
It's definitely powerful, but it's built on this surprisingly simple idea, which is linked notes. So imagine, right, being able to connect your notes on, let's say, 19th century literature.
Right.
To specific novels. To, like, critical essays. To even your own lecture notes.
Yeah.
All in this one dynamic system.
Okay, so you're like building your own, like a web of knowledge, but digitally.
Exactly. Yeah, and the article actually highlights how transformative this can be for teaching.
Okay.
They talk about this one professor, Dr. Lee, who teaches a genetics course.
Okay.
And as you can imagine, genetics, it's a field that is constantly evolving, new research coming out all the time.
Constantly.
And before Obsidian, Dr. Lee was really struggling to keep her course material updated and engaging.
Oh, I can only imagine. It's like trying to hit a moving target.
Exactly. But with Obsidian, she was able to create this system where she could link her lecture notes to, the latest research papers, interactive simulations, even student discussion threads.
That's amazing.
All organized in this way that made sense to her.
So, like, if a student asked a question about, like, I don't know, some new gene editing technique that they read about, she could pull up, like, relevant information, like, on the fly.
Exactly. It allows for that kind of evidence-informed teaching that the article talks about.
Wow.
But what I think is really fascinating is how Dr. Lee uses Obsidian's graph view.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
Remind me what that is again?
So the graph view is basically a visual representation of all your notes and how they connect to each other.
Got it.
So Dr. Lee can literally see the relationships between, different genetic concepts. She can identify any gaps in her material, or even like spot areas where one lecture might be too information heavy.
It's like having X-ray vision
Right?
for your curriculum.
Yeah.
You can see the underlying structure and then make adjustments like in real time.
Exactly. And this ability to actually visualize those connections, that's like the aha moment
Right.
for a lot of educators, according to the article.
Right.
It's not just about having a digital note-taking tool, right?
Right.
It's about having a system that reflects how you think
Totally.
and how you want to teach.
Which makes a lot of sense because everyone's brain kind of organizes information a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
There's not like one right way to do this.
You hit the nail on the head. The article really emphasizes that these tools are meant to be personalized.
Right.
It's about finding what works for you
Yeah.
and adapting it as your knowledge grows.
I love that. This has been so interesting learning about how educators are using these tools for thought. Oh, by the way, the article mentions that tools for thought is like an actual term
Yeah.
in the tech world
It is.
for software that's designed for this kind of like deep thinking
Right.
and knowledge management.
Yeah.
But I keep thinking back to something you said earlier, like this isn't just for professors, right?
Not at all. In fact, the article actually argues that the principles of teaching-related knowledge management
Right.
have relevance for anyone who wants to learn more effectively
Okay.
or share their expertise with others.
So like whether you're leading a team at work
Mm-hmm.
or you're writing a book
Yeah.
or even just trying to like wrap your head around some complex topic,
Absolutely.
these ideas could help.
Totally. I mean, think about it. This approach encourages you to be really deliberate about how you organize information,
Okay.
to constantly be looking for those connections,
Right.
and then to use those connections to deepen your understanding and
Yeah.
communicate more effectively.
Yeah.
And those are valuable skills no matter what you do.
That's a really good point. It's like this article is almost giving us a new lens to view this whole process of learning and sharing knowledge.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And one of the things I thought was really interesting was how much the article emphasized reflection.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of these tools, Obsidian included,
Right.
often have features built in for things like journaling
Okay.
and note linking, which can be really powerful for this.
So you could like jot down your thoughts on a project that you're working on.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, maybe reflect on how your understanding of a topic has evolved over time.
Totally.
And then link those reflections like directly to
Exactly.
the information.
It's amazing. Like, you create this feedback loop
Wow.
where you're constantly learning and refining your understanding.
All right.
And that process of reflection, the article really drives this point home. It's crucial for turning information into actionable knowledge.
Which brings us right back to that idea of Levisogenes wissensmanagement, right?
There you go.
It's not just about like hoarding information. It's
Yeah.
about actually like using it
Exactly.
to make decisions and solve problems
Yes.
and share insights.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And the cool thing is that it can be adapted, like you were saying, to anyone's own like unique needs and learning style.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. Because what works for one person might not work for another. Yeah.
Exactly.
We all have our own like mental filing cabinets, and mine is probably a disaster.
Right. But the key is to find a system, whether it's digital or analog,
Right.
or some combination of the two,
Totally.
that helps you make sense of all that information
Yeah.
and turn it into something meaningful.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
It has.
We've gone from these like hallowed halls of academia
Right?
to the very heart of how we all learn and think
It's true.
and share knowledge, especially in a world that just never stops throwing information at us. Yeah.
Never stops.
It's a little daunting,
It is.
but it's also kind of exciting.
It's incredibly exciting.
It feels very hopeful.
Yes.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Fantastic.
To our listeners, we want to hear from you. What area of your life could use a little teaching-related knowledge management?
I love it.
What project or passion or big idea are you sitting on that might benefit from, just a fresh approach?
Mm-hmm.
And whether you go digital with a tool like Obsidian
Right.
or you just start by, I don't know, like reorganizing your notes,
Yeah.
the principles are the same. Connect the dots, reflect on what you've learned, and don't be afraid to build a system that works for you.
Love it.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.